Today I'm going to talk about how to build a celebrity personal brand and really how I 10x'd my business by doing that and building a mass audience. And I remember having a Skype call with a guy named Grant Cardone about 7.5 years ago. And I asked him at the very end of this call, I said, what would you do differently? What would you do differently with your time, with your money, with your investments? And he gave me a piece of advice that really transformed my business. You know, I'm not as smart as a lot of these speakers that have been up here in certain things. I just try to do things very simple and execute over and over and over again and be myself. And that's what I try to do, is just build a brand that resonates with my audience and connects with people. Key number one for me is relationships. I have been investing in relationships essentially my whole life, but in the last 10 years, once I got done playing professional football, I had no skills, I had no information, I didn't have a degree, I didn't have the smarts like a lot of people had. So I said I need to invest in people. And I need to invest in the people who have all those things so I can build relationships with them and build opportunities. Really, I focused on one thing, and that comes down to value. I think about, and every time I connect with someone, and I've had a lot of people come up and connect with me over the last 24 hours, and it's been great to meet some of you. And some of you have done an amazing job just meeting me for the first time in the things you say. And some of you, I would give some constructive feedback on how to connect with someone like me or anyone else. Because right away, I can tell someone's agenda. Anyone can. We can all tell someone's agenda. Whether we're getting a cold call or meeting someone in person or I'm up here on stage, you can tell my agenda. And for a while, when I first started in business, I was focused on being the king of diamonds. I wanted to make as much money as fast as possible. So I was doing things not to build sustainable relationships that lasted forever with influencers and with my audience. I was doing things to generate as much money as possible. I was in survival mode. And I said, I gotta make money now. And I think some people are focused only on how can I make as much money as possible, as opposed to how can I add a lot of value and make money and we all win together. And that's what I've really tried to focus on, is how can we provide as much value? How can I connect to as many people as possible, and thinking about what they need, not what I need, so it's a win-win experience with my audience, with influencers, business partners, affiliates, anyone in your life. How can you be the king or queen of hearts and not only the king or queen of diamonds? I think when you become the king or queen of hearts, you become the richest man or woman in the world in my mind. And that's what I try to live my life by. The second thing is consistent content. You gotta be thinking about consistent content. Again, this is something Grant taught me 7 years ago. He said, if you're not being consistent with your information, putting it out on a regular basis, whatever schedule works for you, you've gotta stick to it. So what I did is I started a podcast. You know, I started a podcast 5 years ago. This is 2 years after I first originally interviewed Grant. I started the School of Greatness, and I said, I've got to do something that's unique, that adds value, and something that I'm passionate about. So I started this podcast where I started interviewing these individuals, and I've been consistent for 5 years. Every single week, I put out a piece of information. We always have great interviews with quality individuals that are just giving free value to my audience. That's how I'm building a mass audience, by creating consistent content. And that's really been the key. Someone asked me last night, they said, I forget his name, but he was talking about, I want to launch a real estate podcast. Can you give me some keys to launching a podcast? The first thing I said is, do not launch a podcast. Because unless you're going to be committed to doing it every single week or every single 2 weeks consistently for 2 or 3 years, why are you doing it? You got to think about the long-term value you're building with your audience. If you just want to do it because the cool kids are doing it, it's just not going to last long-term. So key 2 is consistent content. And that's what I focus on, is how can we streamline that process. Key 3 is promotion and press. So once you have the content out there, you've got to be so consistent with promoting it to your audience and getting them to share it as well, but also getting bigger audiences to promote. The press. And when I get mainstream press, it always adds more people to my audience. It always brings in new people that didn't know about me. And there's nothing more than the pinnacle of getting press, where Ellen holds up your book and says, this is one of the most inspirational people I've ever met. Go read his book and download his podcast. It really doesn't get bigger than that for someone like me in my space. And yeah, it's promotion and press. Promotion, I'm constantly thinking about how can I elevate my message so that the press wants to have me on, so that they want to feature me to a larger audience, a mass audience. And I started with press early on from just local. People in Columbus, Ohio, I was doing local radio, local TV, local magazines, local newspapers, and went regional, then went national, global. So it started in a progression over the last 8, 9 years. It wasn't like this overnight thing where I put out one book and Ellen was like, let's bring you on. It doesn't work like that. It's been a progression over years. Key number 4 is epic design and branding. Now, I learned this early on because I remember back in like 2010, I was going to a lot of internet marketing conferences. And all these internet marketers were like, screw design. You don't need good design. You just need like headlines with yellow and red. And it doesn't need to look good. It just needs to have like manipulating copy that gets people to buy. And so I was like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. Let me just write this copy and have this ugly looking design. And it worked, right? I was getting sales, but I wasn't building my audience and I wasn't building my brand. And then I said, you know what? I want to get in the press. And I remember interviewing someone from the media and they were like, just taking one look at your website, we would never have you on. One look at your website, we would never interview you for this magazine or things like that. This was earlier in my business. That we would never have you on. We would never promote you because you aren't mainstream media press worthy yet. Your brand does not match the press. And so I said, okay, I'm going to invest in this. And when I started investing in design and really thinking about how can my website look so unique, so different than other people in my industry, not better or worse, but just unique, just different. And how can I really elevate it to really be thoughtful and intentional about the messaging, the words, the images, not in a manipulative way, but more in an inspiring way that wants to attract people back to my message. That's when the press really started to knock on my door. So I started to tell better stories through my design. And I really believe that design allows you to attract more of a mass audience and in the long term generate more sales. Key number 5, a unique product. A unique product. For me, I wanted to stand out from my competitors. I wanted to stand out from other people in my industry. I didn't need to dominate or be better than. I just wanted to stand out and be different. And so I started early on creating unique products, unique offers, things that were just a little bit different. Early on, I had the second book ever written about LinkedIn back in 2009. And there's probably like 1,000 LinkedIn books now. I wrote a book called The School of Greatness. It was a New York Times bestseller. There weren't a lot of people in my space who were going more mainstream, bigger books like that. Then I pivoted and wrote a book about masculine vulnerability. There are no online marketers talking about that. I can guarantee it. There's just not many people that are willing to reveal themselves in this space and talk about those things. And for me, I felt like that was the thing that I needed to do to help support my growth. Maybe the thing that's not going to make me the most money, because this book doesn't make me a lot of money, but it gets me the press, it gets me the attention, it gets me the audience, it gets me the people that connects to their heart on the deepest level. And when I connect to someone's heart, I believe that they'll stay around for a long time. They just want to be in the ecosystem of the content I'm putting out and what I'm providing. My event, this is a unique event. I've never been to an event done this way, this big, with the type of audience that's here, with the production level. I mean, they've done an incredible job. Grant's done an amazing job in essentially a year figuring out how to do an event and put together one of the biggest events. Clap it up for Grant for putting this together. So I remember thinking about doing my own conference a few years ago. And I said, there's a lot of conferences that are done just the same. And I wanted mine to be different. So we created a unique environment in our conference. It's in this beautiful, opera-style theater, and it's connecting on a different level as opposed to just a conference ballroom like most events we're at. So you got to have a unique product. In my opinion, it's got to stand out. It's got to be different. And I'm constantly looking at how can I create new products. Grant always tells me, he's like, you got to have more products, man. You got to have more products. He's always telling me to create new products. My team's like, we got too much going on. We got to just focus on what we're doing. So I try to balance what Grant is pushing me to do and what my team says we need to do. But our courses, from our books to our courses, like the way we create them, the way we develop them, the way we add value, it's all unique and different. And that's what I focus on. How can we be unique and stand out? It's easier to sell something when you stand out and you're different.